"You don't scare me, old man," the gang leader said, breaking the silence in Riverbend café. The old man, Elias Ward, didn't flinch. He tapped the table 3 times, paused, then tapped twice more. Then, quietly, he took a sip of his coffee. The café had stilled. Spoons froze halfway to mouths, chairs creaked softly as tension coiled through the room. It was early morning, but the air inside felt heavy, like thunder pressing against the glass. Outside, a slow fog clung to the riverbanks. Inside, a different storm was building. Elias, 76, sat in the corner booth he'd occupied every morning for 13 years. Same table. Same view of the water. Same cup, black, no sugar. His windbreaker, slate gray, hung from his narrow shoulders like a forgotten flag. His eyes, still sharp under thick brows, did not leave the leader of the gang. The man was tall, loud, his denim jacket stitched with patches of menace. He'd walked in with 5 others, boots thudding, laughter sharp like broken glass. Emily, the waitress, had tried to serve them. They had grabbed her wrist. Elias had set down his paper. Folded it once. Set it beside his saucer. Then the tapping had begun. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 more. The gang had turned to mock him. The leader stepped forward. "You got a problem, Grandpa?" Silence followed. Then, only the sound of the wind stirring the café's front awning. Elias took another sip of coffee. His fingers, though old, were steady. The way he moved, deliberate, economical, suggested a history no one here knew. At least, not yet. Emily backed away, trembling. Other customers stared at the floor. But Elias didn't move. Didn't blink. Somewhere, deep in the silence of Riverbend Café, something old and forgotten stirred. Not rage. Not fear. Something else, older than vengeance. A memory. The gang leader took another step closer. And Elias Ward tapped again. Once. Twice. Elias Ward arrived in Riverbend with nothing but a duffel bag and a name that carried no weight. That was 13 years ago. He'd taken a room above McKinley's Hardware, paid in 6-month increments, and spoke only when required. The locals knew him as the quiet man in the gray windbreaker. Polite. Predictable. A fixture in the back booth of the café by the river. He always sat facing the door. He never came on Sundays. And he never spoke of his past. To the townspeople, he might have been a forestry official once. His posture suggested field discipline. His hands, though gnarled by time, carried the silent precision of someone who knew structure intimately. He folded his napkin the same way each morning. Knife parallel to the plate, spoon crossing the fork at 45 degrees. Not fastidiousness. Pattern. Code. No one suspected he'd once been Commander Elias Ward, designation Blackbird, operational lead for Phoenix Unit, a Cold War task force unacknowledged by Langley, disavowed by the Pentagon, and erased by design. Born from necessity, trained in the shadows, Phoenix Unit operated in the margins of geopolitics. Surveillance extractions. False flag disruptions. Quiet removals. Moral ambiguity wasn't just a feature, it was the environment. By 1987, Ward had orchestrated more than 70 classified operations across 5 continents. He had outmaneuvered Soviet field operatives in Prague, disrupted arms trades in Sudan, and neutralized rogue NATO elements during a failed mutiny in Norway. His name never reached newsprint. His missions never reached records. What remained were consequences, revolutions that fizzled, disappearances that de-escalated potential wars. The men under his command called him the compass. Not for direction, but for silence. Ward never shouted. He corrected. He never punished. He remembered. The kind of leader whose presence changed how men moved. And then, abruptly, he vanished. Phoenix unit was disbanded after a compromised extraction in the Carpathians led to diplomatic fallout. Officially, the mission never happened. Unofficially, 6 men went in. Only 3 came back. Ward carried the weight of the other 3 in his bones. He retired to quiet places. Arkansas. Then Montana. Finally Riverbend, a town ignored by developers, forgotten by planners. He found comfort in its stillness. The owner of the café, Mary Fenwick, had been the first to extend trust. She'd seen the way he moved, his instinct to scan corners, the way his right hand twitched when someone entered fast. She gave him the back booth, unspoken. The locals respected it in the way people unconsciously respect small rituals. Over time, he became part of the landscape. The man who read the paper cover to cover. The man who tipped with cash. The man who nodded to children, always. And he watched. Not because he feared something would come, but because he knew something always did. What no one saw were the little signs. How Elias would tap his coffee cup, 3 taps, pause, then 2. A code, long dormant. How every Thursday, Carl Jensen would stop by the café just long enough to nod. Carl, a retired mechanic, kept to his tools and his silences. But he had once been Phoenix's recon pilot, call sign Moth. His left knee still clicked from the escape over the Albanian hills. They never spoke of it. But the habits remained. Elias scanned for exits. Carl parked backward, facing out. Then came the motorcycles. 6 weeks ago, the distant hum of a motorcycle gang had become a constant on the east side of town. At first, it was noise, then, presence. The gang wore no national patch, just a jagged serpent across a rusted cog. They called themselves the Crags. Led by a man named Rook, tall, lean, and simmering with a need to dominate. He and his riders began frequenting the café, jeering, flexing. They mocked the old town. Took what they wanted, left when they pleased. When they touched Emily, the young waitress, Elias had moved slightly. Just a shift in weight. But enough. His coffee went unfinished that day. The next morning, he wore gloves. The tapping returned. 3. Pause. 2. Carl Jensen noticed. In another life, Phoenix unit had embedded a call and response signal system across its operatives, taps, frequencies, hand signals. Untraceable. Undeniable. Meant for moments exactly like this. Carl responded that night. He dug out the sat phone from under the false flooring of his barn. Brushed off the dust. Dialed a code he hadn't touched in over 3 decades. Phoenix 7 Echo. No one answered. That was expected. But the code sent a signal, a cascade of ghost protocols. In a remote part of Colorado, a radio tower blinked to life for the first time in 26 years. In Utah, a P.O. box was accessed. In Maryland, a man known only as Finch pulled a black file from a locked trunk. Each member of Phoenix unit, those who remained, felt the shift like an old scar aching before rain. Somewhere, something had stirred. Ward never told Riverbend who he was. He never bragged. Never hinted. But that morning, when the gang leader gripped Emily's wrist and spat on the floor, something within Elias had changed. It wasn't anger. It was duty. So he had tapped the code. 3. Pause. 2. Then he had waited. The Crags didn't take long to poison the soil. Riverbend was small, 2,000 residents, a single stoplight, and a police department that hadn't needed new equipment in over a decade. The Crags arrived like a virus, first a trickle, then a flood. 5 riders became 15. Then 20. They began frequenting the bar on River Street, then the gas station, then the café. They rode loud and walked louder, always moving in packs. Rook, their leader, had a way of smiling that made people step aside. He wasn't wild, he was calculated. The kind of man who knew fear was more effective than force. His smile said, "Nothing will stop me, and no one will protect you." At first, it was petty theft. Gas unpaid. Bottles broken. Then came the threats. Business owners who didn't donate found spray paint on their doors, flat tires, shattered windows. Sheriff Mackey tried once, just once, to ticket a Crags rider for reckless driving. His cruiser was torched that same night. The town learned quickly what silence cost. And so silence settled over Riverbend like dust. Elias kept his routine. Booth. Coffee. Paper. Emily, the 19-year-old waitress, continued serving with forced cheer. She was saving for community college. Her father worked nights at the sawmill. Her mother had left when she was 12. Emily didn't complain, she survived. The Crags took a special interest in her. At first, it was remarks. Then touches. Small, casual invasions of her space. She laughed it off. The regulars averted their eyes. No one intervened. Rook liked to lean against the counter and watch her move. "You pour coffee like a prayer," he once said. Reverent. Emily had smiled, pale and rigid. Elias saw everything. He always had. That morning, they cornered her. It was Tuesday. The Crags had rolled in earlier than usual. The café was half empty. Rook leaned across the counter, trapping Emily between the register and the espresso machine. His hand grazed hers. "You ever think of leaving this dump?" he asked, voice soft as a razor. "Could take you on a real ride. Out west. No more tips. No more stains on your apron." Emily tried to laugh, but her voice broke. I like it here." Rook smirked. "You don't belong here, sweetheart. None of you do." Behind them, Elias closed his paper. He set it beside his saucer, slowly. His left hand tapped the table. 3 times. Pause. Then 2. Emily didn't notice. But Carl Jensen, scrubbing a dish behind the counter, did. He froze for a heartbeat. Then kept moving. Outside, the wind shifted. The Crags eventually left, leaving the café in uneasy quiet. Emily washed her hands in the back, trembling. Elias rose, left cash under his cup, and exited without a word. Carl finished rinsing the dishes. Dried his hands. Then stepped through the back door and disappeared. By dusk, Emily had filed no report. No one had. That night, the Crags returned. This time with more. They revved their engines outside the café for a full 5 minutes before entering. They occupied 3 booths. Drank coffee they didn't pay for. When Emily accidentally spilled cream on one of their jackets, Rook grabbed her wrist, pulled her close. "This hand's too soft for waitress work," he said. "Come on. I'll show you something better." The café froze. Emily yanked her arm back. "Please stop." Rook rose, towering over her. "Say that again?" From the back, a voice spoke. "Let her go." Rook turned. Elias was standing now, coat still on, unmoving. "You say something, Grandpa." "I said, let her go." The silence that followed was cold and absolute. Then Rook laughed. "You don't scare me, old man." He took a step forward. That was when Elias tapped again. 3. Pause. 2. Rook scoffed. "What's that? Morse code for help?" He reached forward. Elias didn't move. Outside, unnoticed by the gang, a dark SUV coasted slowly past the cafe's front window. No headlights. No license plate. Elias sat back down, resumed his coffee. That night, a call reached the outer rings of a forgotten network. Phoenix 7 Echo. In a farmhouse in Wyoming, a man known once as Hollow unlocked a vault that hadn't been touched in 20 years. In New Mexico, a long-retired operative with a prosthetic leg checked his phone and left immediately, saying nothing to his wife. They didn't need explanation. They'd heard the code. Back in Riverbend, the Craggs began to tighten their hold. They demanded protection money from the gas station. Threatened to torch the post office unless deliveries stopped going to outsiders. Flyers went up, obey the Craggs or leave. No one removed them. One of the town's teenagers, Gavin Mayfield, was hospitalized after resisting Rook's gang at the skate park. Broken ribs. Broken nose. Still, no arrests. Sheriff Mackey retired early. No replacement appointed. Emily stopped taking late shifts. Elias kept coming to the cafe. The regulars stopped sitting near him. Fear isolates the brave. The Craggs believed they had won. They believed Elias was just another relic, brittle and ornamental. But Elias Ward wasn't alone. Not anymore. The men he once led were no longer in uniform. But they had not forgotten how to answer a call. And the call had been made. Carl Jensen closed the cafe's kitchen door quietly behind him. The bell above it didn't ring. He moved through the alley behind the building, past dumpsters and weeds grown through cracked pavement. His boots, old but well-kept, made no sound. He wasn't in a hurry. He was remembering. 15 minutes later, he reached the barn. It looked abandoned, leaning slightly, sun-bleached boards, padlock half-rusted. But inside, beneath the false flooring where old tires and decoys lay in dust, was something else. A black military-grade sat phone, sealed in oilcloth. He had placed it there 19 years ago, under instructions given only once and never again. He flipped the switch. Turned the rotary dial to the 7th notch. Phoenix 7, Echo. It didn't ring. It pulsed, a silent, encrypted signal carried on buried frequencies. Dead air to everyone else. But not to the ones it was meant for. In North Carolina, a light blinked inside a retired colonel's workshop. In Utah, a sealed P.O. box sent out a forwarding request. In Colorado, a man known only as Hollow retrieved a metal case buried behind insulation in a garage wall. Old hands opened compartments. Checked gear. Waited for the final call. In Riverbend, Elias Ward folded his napkin exactly once and left the cafe. 2 hours later, 4 unmarked SUVs entered town. They came separately, one down the state highway, one from a logging road, 2 from back routes through farmland. They made no announcement. No lights. No plates. Just matte gray vehicles, quiet and nondescript. They parked without blocking traffic. They waited. Inside, 4 men, each in their late 60s, dressed plainly, moving with deliberate efficiency. They gathered briefly outside a closed gas station. No word spoken. One nodded. A plan confirmed. At 8:47 a.m., they entered Riverbend Café. Emily was at the register. Her hands trembled slightly when the bell rang. The Craggs were in their usual place, 3 booths spread across the back half, loud, loose, dangerous. Rook was near the counter, flipping his knife open and closed. The 4 men didn't glance at him. They walked straight to Elias. He stood. The room fell quiet. No raised voices. No weapons drawn. Roebuck moved first, approaching a Cragg by the jukebox. A flick of the wrist locked, arm behind the back, body lowered to the floor without a sound. Another crag rose. Finch intercepted, disarmed him mid-motion, a pressure point behind the ear, dropped him gently. McCrae, the largest, handled 2 at once. Open palm strikes to the chest and collarbone. Precise. Measured. No more than necessary. Rook lunged. Elias caught his arm, pivoted inward, sent him sprawling over a chair. He hit the floor, hard. Rolled. Looked up. Surrounded. Gray-haired men. Weathered. Calm. One of them leaned down, whispered something in Rook's ear. Whatever it was, Rook paled. No one in the café spoke. No one moved. Emily stared, her lips parted. The coffee pot in her hand steamed quietly. Then, silence. It was over in seconds. The crags were disarmed, disoriented, disbelieving. The men of Phoenix didn't gloat. They didn't speak. They moved the gang members to the sidewalk, told them to leave town. No threats. Just eyes that said, "We're not asking." Rook looked at Elias once more. Something like understanding passed between them. Then the crags were gone. Elias returned to his booth. Saturday. Emily brought his coffee, hands still shaking, but steadier now. No one clapped. But someone exhaled. And Carl, from across the street, leaned against the doorframe of his garage, arms folded. It was done. The sun broke clean over Riverbend the next morning. Its light crept across shuttered storefronts and dust-frosted windows, across the gravel shoulders of Route 14 and the frost-stiffened grass of Marrow Creek. The town was quiet, eerily so. No rumble of motorcycles. No lingering laughter. Just the morning wind and the slow shuffle of normal returning. Inside Riverbend Café, the air was warmer. Emily moved from table to table with a steadiness she hadn't felt in weeks. She smiled without forcing it. Her wrists no longer ached with bruises. Elias Ward sat in his booth. His coffee was black. No sugar. Same as always. But today, the paper remained folded. He didn't read. He waited. At 9:04 a.m., the door opened. A man stepped inside wearing a dark wool coat and polished boots. His face was lean and sharp, softened only by the age around his eyes. He walked with a slight limp, left leg, half a second behind the right. He didn't order. He crossed the room, paused at Elias's booth. Elias looked up. Finch nodded once. It held. Elias said nothing, only gestured to the seat across from him. They sat for a while in silence. By 10 a.m., another man entered, Roebuck, still wearing his gloves, eyes scanning the café automatically before relaxing. Behind him came McCrae, followed closely by Grant, his hand resting lightly on the back of a chair as he passed. The booth didn't expand. Instead, they took adjacent tables. Spread out like a perimeter. Emily approached, uncertain. Elias looked at her, nodded. She poured their coffees with shaking hands. None of the men corrected her when she placed the spoons wrong. None of them spoke. Emily placed the last cup. "Thank you," she whispered. Roebuck looked at her. "You're safe now." She nodded. Eyes wet. That afternoon, word began to ripple. Not loudly, not in gossip. But in undercurrents. At Harlan's barbershop, an old man named Reed pulled out a box from beneath the register. Inside, a yellowing map of Vietnam. He touched the name stenciled on the corner, Ward, E.J. At the post office, Darla Marsh found a letter in the outgoing bin addressed only to Finch, return Route 83A. No stamp. At the VFW Hall on Blanton Street, a group of veterans gathered early. Carl Jensen arrived with 2 black and white photos from his barn. In one, 6 men stood in front of a rusted plane, arms draped over one another. In the other, a shot of Elias from 1975, kneeling beside a wounded child, eyes half-lidded in exhaustion. They passed the photos around. Names were whispered. Stories recounted. None exaggerated. A man from Idaho remembered the compass. A retired naval officer recalled an intercepted Soviet dispatch, Operation Blackbird Interference, never explained, never followed up. One by one, the names came back to them. Phoenix. Someone pinned a note to the bulletin board. Respect the booth. Respect the silence. No one took it down. By Thursday, a subtle change had come over Riverbend. The Craggs didn't return. The sheriff, newly sworn, began asking questions. Not to prosecute, but to understand. She walked the length of Main Street twice that day. Stopped by the café. Ordered coffee. Tipped well. Said nothing about the events. But when she left, she paused at Elias's booth. "Thank you," she said. He looked up once. Then returned to his paper. Emily placed a small plaque beneath the counter that read, "Table 7 reserved for quiet loyalty." No one questioned it. Across town, Carl installed a fresh lock on his barn. He repainted the floorboards, replaced the sat phone in its case. But he didn't bury it this time. He left it in plain sight. As if the signal might be needed again. And beyond Riverbend, far beyond, word moved without wires. In Montana, a retired officer received a visitor, silent, clean-cut, bearing only a faded Phoenix patch. They talked for 2 hours. No notes taken. In Tennessee, a man with burned hands mailed a single envelope marked, "Reply, Echo confirmed." And at a bar in New Orleans, a stranger left behind a coin. It bore the hawk and the broken compass. The bartender nodded when he saw it. Then closed early. Elias continued coming to the café. The town never asked where the Craggs went. But they knew. When a man named Rook tried to file a complaint with state police, he left the station with a bruise under his eye and no report filed. He never returned. Phoenix didn't operate under laws. It operated under memory. And memory had a long reach. The men gathered at Elias's booth once more the following Sunday. No plan. No reunion. Just presence. Emily brought coffee. No one spoke for 30 minutes. Then Roebuck said softly, "Still stands." Finch nodded. Always did. Elias looked toward the window, watching the river. They'll come again. Someone will. Grant leaned forward. Then we'll answer. The old bonds hadn't weakened. They had only waited. Somewhere in Riverbend, a child passed the café, tugged at her father's hand. "Why is everyone so quiet in there?" The father didn't answer right away. Then said, "Because some things deserve silence." Elias folded his paper. Tapped the table twice. The others stood. And left. By the following week, a new brass plaque appeared inside Riverbend Café, just beneath the high windowpane by the back booth. It was small, fixed with care, polished daily by Emily. Respect the booth. Respect the silence. It carried no date, no name. No explanation. Just those 6 words. It became part of the wall like it had always been there. Locals understood. Outsiders didn't ask. The Craggs were gone. Not run out, not arrested, just gone. Their clubhouse emptied overnight. No engines. No final threats. Just absence. Like they'd never really belonged in the town they once tried to claim. No one cheered. Riverbend wasn't a town of grand gestures. But people stood straighter now. Doors stayed unlocked again. Children returned to their bikes. Teenagers lingered longer at the café counter, talking to Emily as if the shadow had lifted. Elias kept his seat by the window. Still gray windbreaker. Still black coffee. Still no sugar. On some mornings, another gray-haired man would appear, someone with out-of-state plates and a cautious step. They'd order coffee, sit 2 booths away, and exchange a nod with Elias. Nothing more. It was enough. Emily, for her part, no longer flinched at the bell above the café door. She carried herself differently now, shoulders drawn back, eyes clear. The look of someone who had been seen. Protected. Respected. She found an old typewriter in the back room one day, covered in dust. With Carl's help, she restored it. Set it on a shelf behind the register. Above it, a photograph of 6 men standing in front of the café. Their expressions calm. Unposed. Timeless. No names. Only a small card beneath it, typed in faded ribbon. Phoenix Unit. Somewhere quiet. She placed fresh flowers there every Thursday. At the VFW hall, the stories began to shift. Veterans who once sat in silence now spoke in fragments. I thought Ward had disappeared. I trained with a guy who talked about Phoenix, only once. They were ghosts, man. Nobody knew where they came from. Whispers turned into questions. And with the questions came a strange kind of reverence, not for war, but for the men who had carried its weight without demanding acknowledgement. Carl resumed work on his truck, but visitors started showing up, men he hadn't seen in 30 years. They didn't talk about the mission. They talked about tools. Fishing. Grandchildren. But between the lines, in long silences, old wounds were seen. Across state lines, similar events took root. A sheriff in Wyoming found an envelope on his desk, inside, a list of gang names, locations, and contacts. No return address. All were disbanded within months. A judge in Illinois presided over a case involving a veteran. Mid-trial, he received a call routed through 3 unlisted numbers. The charges were quietly dropped. No one asked why. In California, a homeless man was offered shelter without explanation. The volunteer simply said, "You knew Finch, didn't you?" And in Riverbend, something settled. A presence. A kind of stillness that carried memory. On Veterans Day, a new bench appeared by the riverside path. No one knew who installed it. But its backrest bore an inscription. For those who served in silence. For those who never left the field. The mayor issued a quiet proclamation honoring undocumented acts of service in defense of the town. No one named names. The document remains in the town hall, unframed, but intact. Emily's life changed subtly. Customers listened when she spoke now. Young men treated her with gentle formality. Her tips increased, though she never mentioned the incident. When a stranger asked her once what happened with the gang, she just said, "They left." In the barn, Carl oiled the hinges of the false floor and reinforced the beam that held the sat phone case. He didn't intend to use it again. But he also didn't seal it. Some technologies, some codes, weren't meant to be deactivated. They were meant to wait. Because memory waits. Because duty doesn't retire. And because some men, some brotherhoods, live by a different rhythm. They don't hold press conferences. They don't leave memoirs. They leave traces, in how they move, in what they protect, and in what they refuse to abandon. Years passed. Elias grew slower, but never frail. His eyes remained sharp. He added gloves in winter, but never changed booths. When asked why he never took the table with the better view, he answered only once. "This one watches the door." Carl built a new gate for his driveway, reinforced iron, no decoration. One day, a fresh Phoenix insignia appeared etched into the metal. He said nothing about it. Roebuck opened a small martial arts studio in Idaho Falls. He taught mostly children. No trophies on the wall. Only a faded photo of 5 men kneeling in mud. Finch taught a radio class to a handful of teenagers in Vermont. He never mentioned his past, but every student left understanding silence better than they had before. McCrae passed away in 2028. His funeral was small. 6 men stood in the back, heads bowed. No tears. Just a flag folded with care. Grant's cancer returned, but he wrote one last letter before the end. It was addressed to Elias. It said only, "Still stands." And it did. Because legacy, for Phoenix, was never about recognition. It was about readiness. About the quiet restoration of what others failed to defend. About the dignity owed to those who still walk with the weight of unspoken years. In Riverbend, the café stayed open. And if someone asked about Table 7, Emily would only smile. Some people keep watch, she'd say. So the rest of us can rest. Still watching.